All right, everybody. Woo, all right, that's loud. We're good. Good to see everybody. I'm Steve Wilson, and this is Scott Clinton.
Hi, guys.
I'm the lead for the OWASP Top 10 for large language models, and Scott is one of the co-leads. And so we're going to go through and talk a little bit about the project, what state it's in. But maybe as we do that, I'll just do a little bit of checking. Who here has read the LLM Top 10 document? Okay, good. I guessed correctly, because we're not going to do an overview of the top 10. We're really going to kind of get into a little bit more about the impact, what's going on in the version 2 project, and talk about other ways you can get involved. Let me ask this. Who's views themselves as an active participant? Anybody here who's on the Slack channel that I maybe haven't seen you in real life yet? Okay, this is perfect. Everybody's read it. Nobody is participating. We brought exactly the right presentation. So we're going to try and fix that. We'll give you a bunch of opportunities to jump in and get involved if you're interested in doing that, because it's a really fun group. So let's dive in. So I'm Steve. My day job is I work at Exabeam. Exabeam's in the SIM, UEBA, SecOps space. Little more than a year ago, I founded the LLM Top 10 project. The short version of the story is I thought I'd find 10 like-minded people in the world who might be interested in obscure stuff like security for LLMs. When I posted it on my LinkedIn, I had 200 people on a Slack channel within 7 days, and it's just grown from there. And we'll talk about some of the stats on it, but it's quite amazing. Worked at all sorts of previous places, including all the way back to Scott and I were comparing ancient things that we worked on, and we both did work at Sun, but I was an early member of the Java team, so feel free to blame me for whatever you want to there. I'm not going to do a full plug for it, but did launch my new book this week from O'Reilly, and I will do a little plug later because I can't resist. Scott?
Yeah, I'm Scott. I've been, as Steve said, we crossed paths a few years back, but I've also been in the industry now for about 15 years on the security side, also on the AI side, both for a number of companies there, as you can see, and working with a number of startups to kind of help them in the space. Got interested in what Steve was doing, kind of jumped in, and we just started kind of driving the thing forward some more. So yeah.
All right, so I think if you guys have read the docs, you probably read it because you've seen what's going out in the industry, but it feels like basically everybody is rushing headlong into jamming a chatbot into their software. And we see so many cases where people don't realize what's going on. These were some of the very early ones. I really could make a much updated version of this slide, and Scott and I were talking about updating some of the case studies, but we moved on from small company does stupid thing with chatbot to Microsoft Copilot vulnerable to indirect prompt injection, Slack vulnerable to indirect prompt injection. And so we moved on to the biggest, largest, most sophisticated software companies in the world making these same mistakes. And so part of what we're trying to do is educate the industry on this so that people will be better prepared for it. I guarantee you Apple Intelligence is going to trip into these as well, because I've seen no indication that they're not. They're running around trying to make hardened data centers and LLMs that run on the device without concern for a lot of the things we know are the big challenges. So this really does get into the fact that the industry is playing catch up, and it's interesting because I feel like compared to a lot of previous waves, the industry's jumped on security for this pretty quickly. The only difference is it's jumped on deploying it in anger even faster. And that leaves us as defenders, as security people, playing catch up here. And so the idea of this project is to give people an idea what's going on and what are some of the big challenges and how you deal with that. One of the things that we've seen in the last year plus since we published the first version of this is kind of a dramatic expansion of the use cases. Initially it kind of was chatbots, And then, we kind of got into things like co-pilots. Now we're to the point where we're dealing with a lot of these things. We had one entry in the original top 10, it's one of my favorite ones, called excessive agency, which is like, how much privilege am I going to run around, give these things to run around on their own and make decisions and execute things? There's a lot of risk that goes with that, and what we see right now is that the hottest topic in all of AI is agents. And I spent all of yesterday at the Microsoft Reactor up the street, which is their startup incubator, listening to 7 hours of pitches of startups doing AI agents, and I think most of them have no idea what they're getting into. I think what this means is the problems are only going to get more complicated, and this is some of what we're getting into in the V2 of the project. So, the goal here is to do some of that informing. I think the thing that's been great, and we'll get into it, is it was picked up very quickly, and it's become kind of a foundational document. OWASP is a great community, but it's very grassroots. It doesn't really have the ability to force people into doing things. It's not a compliance body. It's not a government standard. But some of the people building those have gotten quite enamored with the work that the group is doing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The other thing, and this is just some of the stats, and in fact they need updating because I noticed the LinkedIn count tripped over 3,000 recently. But basically we have thousands of people following this actively, and I guarantee you that this document's been read by over 100,000 developers or AppSec people just from the stats that we see, and I really don't see a lot of the ways that it gets passed around. And you can see a lot of companies have sort of thrown themselves in and say that they want to be involved in this, and that is one of the things that Scott's been pushing, is other ways for corporations to get more deeply involved and kind of contribute to the project. So, going to that conversation around things like standards bodies, with NIST and MITRE, we actually have gotten quite involved with the NIST group. We actually had OWASP join the NIST AI safety group, and that meant somehow we actually got OWASP to become a member of NIST or something like this. It was very complicated politics. Scott and some of the other guys took care of that. MITRE's an interesting one because everybody knows MITRE ATT&CK. MITRE Atlas is sort of the AI-focused version of that. When we started the project, it was much thinner. There was a set of meetings that happened between our group and the MITRE group, and all of a sudden there were a bunch more things that got added. And you can see they're basically entries straight out of the top 10 list. So it's kind of rewarding to see these things getting in all sorts of other places. We are getting pulled into a lot more, oddly enough, government discussions. I tell you all a true story. A week or two ago, I got a clip on YouTube, because I watch a lot of AI stuff on YouTube. But it was a clip from C-SPAN, the one that films all the boring. So it's Senator Chuck Schumer at a Senate hearing talking about AI guardrails and red teaming. Not on my bingo card 12 months ago. That's how prevalent this has become, and that speaks to the attention that this is getting. Hey Scott, why don't you take over for a little bit?
Okay, sounds good. So we've been seeing, as Steve was saying, we've seen a huge amount of pickup in growth, nothing that we really kind of ever expected. And so just some additional stats, our GitHub stars continuing to grow. This is actually like the other stats, these are behind, so our stats are actually more than this. So comes back to trying to keep the slides up with the stats. So that continues to grow. Love to have more people participating, come on board and start bringing that together. The other part is, as Steve talked about, we've seen a large adoption and usage of the top 10. This is coming from commercial companies. We've got hundreds of articles that have been written out there. We did a quick check last year kind of to figure out how much impact we were kind of having. We did sort of a rough share of voice kind of measurement, and we found we were around 58% of share of voice. People who are writing articles about securing LLMs, about 58% of those articles included references to the top 10. So again, more surprises for us, all good things, more videos. So there have been hundreds of videos created, and so it continues to, we're kind of really surprised by the impact and happy about the impact that it's been having. So these are we started off with the top 10. Steve started off with the top 10. And we saw that there were more needs to kind of go beyond just the top 10 risks and mitigations, but also to start talking about solutions. And Sandy Dunn was one of the first who kind of came together and thought, what we need to do is have a checklist for CISOs. So she started this project, which is the checklist for CISOs, which has, again, seen broad adoption and usage. We'll share a roadmap a little bit later of both this and the top 10 in terms of timing and how we're kind of evolving these, because these are living documents. We're evolving and growing. The other area around solutions has been, the other area was, what are the solutions? So there's also a solutions guide that's been developed, focused around the kind of defining an LLM SecOps process and framework to be able to help people find the open source and commercial solutions, and that's getting ready to roll out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, just one observation there. There's kind of a really interesting mapping between the traditional AppSec tools that everybody here knows and loves, your SAST, DAST tools and your RASPs and your WAFs. There are analogs that are growing up for all of these. They're often not from the same companies. Also, some of those companies are thinking about moving into this, but you see a lot of pure play startups actually with a lot of funding that are building things. If you look at something like AI guardrails, a lot of those are actually implemented basically not that much different than a next-gen WAF. It's like next-gen WAFs. Some of them are built into the software and are more like a RASP. So all of those things that you know from the AppSec world, they're growing sets of tooling that you can take advantage of to do this. And that's one of the goals of that solutions guide, is help get that in one place so you can go find them.
Yeah, and like Steve said, there are tools that are what I'll call morphing to take on AI attributes, but then there are also net new tools who are kind of showing up to try to solve solutions. They may be similar to things you've used before, but there's also new problems, so there's new tools. So our whole goal there is to make sure we can give you some guidance, at least make it easier for you to find the tools that are heading that way, whether they're morphing to become more AI-centric or whether they are net new tools that may be something you need to learn on. Shall I hand it back?
Yeah, so just to highlight this, the other thing that's interesting that happened, the top 10 list wasn't the first AI project at OWASP, but some of them were kind of nascent. Others have really grown up since then. The combination of them, though, it's a super active AI ecosystem, and it's very interesting because I exist in these two worlds these days, where I exist in the cybersecurity world and the AI world, and these are both things that have decades of history and had never collided before. And so I think just one of the things that's interesting is in the AI world, I think OWASP is actually one of the first names people think of for where to go get guidance now around security, because there are these strong standards, air quote standards, that have popped up, like the top 10 list, like the guidance coming out of the AI exchange, and even things like Cyclone DX adding ML bomb, and it's clunky right now, and if anybody's on that expert group, I have feedback for you. But it's awesome to see this all coming out of one place, out of OWASP, and it really has made itself a spot in the industry that way. So we did the survey earlier. Everybody's read it. This is the top 10 list as it stands today. We got a few of these just to highlight, and I'll talk about kind of how this is evolving. There's one of these standards examples here. It's a really simple direct prompt injection where somebody is convincing the bot to sell them a car for $1. And those things are still out there and they're still embarrassing. But I mentioned it earlier, the indirect prompt injection in particular is really insidious, and even the more sophisticated companies out there are struggling to deal with it. If you're going to allow large swaths of untrusted data to come in and get parsed by your bot, you're asking for this. And so it is these people like Microsoft and Slack that are putting themselves out there, and you need to be careful. Supply chain, I'm working on an article right now that I call the AI software supply chain is a dumpster fire. We all have enough trouble with regular software supply chain and just managing the Linux packages and Python packages and things that you have in your software stack. When you get something like Hugging Face replacing something like GitHub, all of your problems are massively multiplied. And actually Hugging Face is this amazing service that I think in the long term is going to benefit all of us, but the AI community does not have this history around cybersecurity and continues to trip over things. And there are these, in the first top 10 list, there was a few examples of we knew there'd been places where their tokens had leaked and things like that. Now there are just studies that say there are tens of thousands of poisoned models on Hugging Face, and you need to be really careful. The last one here, insecure output handling. These are just, again, headlines of sort of we've moved from the point where it's from, swearing at people and calling them bad names to, sort of these extremes. And this also does indicate to another thing that we're getting into more in the V2 discussions, which is how much of this is pure large language model and how much are we getting into multimodal things and image generation and image recognition. And the fact is, technologically, these things are not much different. So, Scott, you take this next bit.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, we started with the top 10 list. We had a couple of additions, but we're continuing to do more with the project because just as Steve was saying, there are new challenges. We were just talking a little bit about how close things like deepfakes and these multimodal models are coming together. So the challenges are transferring across different architectures. And so we have also recognized that we need to be able to do more. So through the project, we've created an initiative structure that helps us make sure that we've got initiatives to address some of those issues. And think about these as mini projects, or some of them are not so many, but allows us to keep them focused around the project, the top 10 focus, and then be able to do some more things around that. So an example of that is, so if we look at our roadmap of activities, as I mentioned before, we have those top 3 documents. But we also, through these initiatives, are doing more things. So we've got a data collection initiative, which is focused at giving us more data and validity to drive more proof points behind the top 10 in the work that we're doing. So basically collecting it, making sure that it's consistent and supporting that. We also have launched another research initiative, so understanding that there's not as much information as we like around this. This is a moving target. So Rachel James, thanks. I kept wanting to say Wilson because you're standing next to me. So Rachel James is started and is heading up this initiative, and this is focused on some joint work we're doing, and I'll share an example of that in a minute. But the goal is to do some first-party research to fill in some of the gaps, because with the top 10, we've recognized the gaps. We know there are gaps that need to be filled in, and so this is a way that we can start to do it. Lastly, another audience group that we looked at with CISOs, there was feedback, how do we set up an AI security center of excellence? There's a lot of discussion around how to build practices around that, so we've extended and created have an initiative around that has created some content they'll be publishing out shortly to provide that guidance. And lastly, the one that just got kicked off about 3 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, that got approved, which is a focus on red teaming, both against AI systems and leveraging red teaming to accelerate security. So providing some guidance around that as well.
By the way, just interesting trivia fact, and this was part of the discussion that I had yesterday, is when we go talk to AI people, as opposed to security people, AI people think red teaming is an AI term. Because it's all of a sudden popped into the vernacular because it wound up in President Biden's order around AI. And they will ask these very naive questions like, where do I find people who know how to do this? And I'm like, well, you should start with your AppSec team. You all can work on developing new skills about how to do it, but you all have the foundations for it. And I don't think the AI people really understand what you can bring to the party. So just it's an education thing that we can all do together to make sure that everybody understands what everybody's bringing to the party.
Yeah, and I think that's reflective of sort of the immaturity is where we are in this process, right? So it's the silos that kind of still exist, and the being able to connect those silos, you guys are the resources they're going to need to access. So helping people understand that, I think is important. So I'll talk a little bit here real briefly. So as I mentioned before, we're providing this solutions guide. This is going to be rolling out near the end of September. If you have ideas, there's ways to propose other solutions. There'll be a button there. You guys can just add to it. So we have an inventory of those solutions. So that'll be coming out. As I mentioned before, we are doing some first-party research. Rachel has been heading this up, and part of that was an initiative we've done with the University of Illinois, who is providing us both some of their research data as well as resources so that we can help use that to do some analysis between different LLM systems. And we have a prolific set of writers in the core team, which is a great set of resources for you guys. The little Steve in his book. So the good news is that we got a detailed set of guidance, and these are really good books to take a look at if you haven't already. And that's really helping kind of bring more detail to this as well. So check it out, not just because Steve is here, but they're actually good books. So have a read.
I got 5 copies in the mail this week. They're the first actual copies that exist. I did bring a couple. If anybody wants to come up afterwards and leaf through it, you're welcome to come check it out. But the Developer's Playbook for Large Language Model Security, if you want to go type that into your Amazon.
You can do it right now. All right, so I'll pass it over to you again, Steve.
All right. So let's talk about what we're calling the 2.0 project. And I think what we've realized is we are going to get this done before the end of the year. So this will become, using more standard OWASP vernacular, this will become the 2024 OWASP Top 10 for large language models. So I'll share a little bit about what we've learned through the process. We've really been running this for several months. It started with a lot of research on the expert team about what were sort of the hot topics, what were the things that had changed. So one of the interesting things is when I actually started the group, my intent was to provide guidance to software developers. Unfortunately, the data implies what you all know as AppSec people, which is developers don't care. And you see the mix of who's here. We have more CISOs involved in an OWASP project than we do software developers. It's like everybody but the software developers care. And I'm a software developer at my heart. I've been writing software since I was 6. I worked as a professional software engineer for decades. But there's going to be more bleeding before they really come to understand, and this group can help with that. One of the things that we did was we took a look at the existing top 10 and we put out a set of voting just to have people re-rank them. We didn't take into consideration new ones, although we have since, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But it's just interesting to see how things moved up and down. We talked about the supply chain dumpster fire. That's moved up to right behind prompt injection. We'll see where it settles out in the final voting, but no question that went way up the list. It was a very abstract worry 12 months ago. Now it's top of mind for everybody. Excessive agency started creeping up the list. I think it would be even higher if we redid this right now, and we are going to redo this probably again in the next 30 days. But again, when you're running whole conferences dedicated to intelligent agents and agentics, and people are just making up words now, how do you safely do that? How can you give more agency to your AI and do it safely? It's going to be a huge question, and I actually suspect whoever wins those agent wars, it will be more about can you actually do it and do it securely than do you have all the best bells and whistles. A little bit on trends. I think we identified a bunch of trends as a group and then had people vote on them, which ones were important. If you look at the distributions here, it's like this is critical, very important, somewhat important. The answer was like everybody is concerned about everything. There's nothing here where somebody said, I don't care about that yet. You'll see the ones that kind of had the least big votes still. There's like the blue bars are I don't care, it's not important, and there's almost no blue bars for any of them the way that people voted. So when you can see them stack ranked, but the fact is these emerging areas like bias, sustainability probably got the fewest votes, but actually for any of you who didn't see it, Microsoft has convinced somebody to reactivate 3 Mile Island to power their AI data center. So we're all going to start caring about sustainability and AI really soon if we're building new nuclear power plants for it. But the standard ones, privacy, safety, ethics. The one that I think is going to continue to be a big topic, and if you follow the news around OpenAI and everybody there quitting, it's all about are they really committed to their alignment program? And the answer appears to be not at all. So that's going to be a really hot topic. So I'm going to let Scott talk about some of the ways you can jump in and participate.
Yeah.
Because we checked, almost none of you are. So everybody, here you go.
Yep. So a couple things. So just to help you guys get oriented, there's some great ways for you to jump in on the project. We have 3 basic places to hop in. First is our public website. That's the genai.owasp.org. That's where all of our materials we're publishing for your kind of your first entry point into the project. And if you have friends who don't know anything about AI security and you want to educate them, send them there. That's a good starting point. We have the OWASP page for OWASP community members. That's a place to hop in and see where we are with that. We also then have our collaboration location. All of these are linked together, so if you start at one, you're going to find your way to the other. We also have an open meeting every 2 weeks. You can join us in the open meeting. This is also on all 3 locations, website as well as the collaboration spaces. And if you get behind and you want to catch up, we are publishing all of that to YouTube and also on Spotify. So whether you're in the car, want to listen to some us banter around and talk about what we're working on, because you're bored, feel free to do that. So, or hop on with the other on YouTube. As Steve mentioned, we are just, because of the level of interest around the project, we are just launching a sponsorship program. So we already have a group of sponsors that have come on board to help support the work. As we mentioned before, we're doing some first-party research. We're also leveraging some of these funding to kind of help us do the outreach and communications around this, because this is such a hot and interesting topic for folks. So there's opportunities for both vendors as well as just regular companies, commercial companies. So we have commercial companies who are looking to be sponsors of this to kind of help make sure we're able to invest and keep going on this track. For details, if you're interested, the details are on the website. We have a full sponsorship program. You can learn how to get involved, what the costs are, what the benefits are, et cetera. And lastly, there's a first part to engage with us is joining us on Slack. So we have, as I mentioned, we have a number of projects going on. Our main one, if you want to get started, is jump into the top 10. We have, Steve and Ads are kind of leading that. Hop onto that Slack channel. You can get the wiki for the latest lists. We also have for our initiatives, each of the initiative leads there and the Slack channels, you can join and be part of that.
As incentive to join that channel, I will post these slides there tonight. So if you don't want to get stuck taking pictures of slides on bad screens.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the other things that we're doing, everything from we're doing a lot of work around working with standards groups. So there's a working group that's on that. So if you want to be involved with some of our standards group collaboration, hop on there. John's leading that. And then if you're doing outreach and sponsorship and that sort of thing, feel free to reach out to me. Join the channel if you want to contribute. We've got lots of work to do. No shortage of that, and so a great opportunity to both contribute and participate. So on that one you can take a picture of right now.
Yep.
To subscribe to the newsletter, and that comes out monthly, so you'll be able to get up to date on what's coming out and what's going on with the project.
There's one more.
And lastly, you can follow us on LinkedIn. So, anything else to add, Steve?
No, we got some time. I think we got 15 minutes left. So, people got questions? Yeah, right up here.
Yeah, what is the prompt for your front slide, the one with the West San Francisco?
So I often get asked about these. All the Gen AI pictures in here were built with DALL-E inside the paid version of GPT. I literally said something like, I want a giant robotic wasp attacking San Francisco. I have other versions of it. I was at the OWASP chapter in Los Angeles a couple months ago. And I should bring it up and show it to you, but it's really cool because I said, I wanted attacking Los Angeles, and it's actually on top of a mountain looking down at downtown LA, and it has the Hollywood sign on the mountain. And I looked at those slides for 2 weeks until I put them up on the screen, and somebody goes, did you make Hollywood have 3 L's on purpose? And so there's a beautiful hallucination right in the middle of the slide. But the prompts are actually, these days, 12 months ago, you had to go get exotic tooling and mess around with stuff. And if you want to go play with Midjourney, that's still hard. But if you want to just get into the basics of doing some fun AI art, just go mess around. Other questions? Over here.
I'm just going back one slide to the newsletter.
You bet.
And while people are taking pictures, anybody else? Questions, comments? Right there.
So I have a question about the whole OWASP top 10 for LLM and how that is mapping to any of the tools or controls. So we come from very audited company, and as part of all our audits, it's usually, and currently now, it will go against OWASP top 10, right? Because OWASP top 10 LLM is out, so audits or other institutions are coming back to doing what are you guys doing about it, right? And how are you mapping? What controls do you have in place? What tools do you have in place? Is there any plans on mapping those to so that, for example, software supply chain, definitely there would be an opportunity.
Yeah,
It's a little, like,
you didn't put the pillar there, it's okay.
yeah. For example, for supply chain security, definitely there's an opportunity to map to certain tool, right? That supply chain using. So any mappings like that or
So Scott, let me just get the question on the tape.
I was just
real
gonna-
quick.
yeah.
All right, you go for it. Short version.
So you're looking for, so the question was around, are there other mappings of the top 10 to more reporting that you're going to be doing and to more verifications?
right.
Yep. So we had, so verifications and controls and yeah, and the tools, of course. So we actually have done a fair amount of work in the controls mapping, which is actually in the I keep wanting to say data discovery, it's data verification initiative. And that has mappings to all of the industry standards. So you can do correlations between the top 10 and CVS, AVCS. We have the full set of criteria all outlined there, all the controls. Secondly, for like the solutions, you're talking about supply chain, that is a category, and so that is actually going to be available in the solutions guide, listing the types of tools specifically that may address supply chain by category.
I'll give you one other trivia fact, and I'll keep the names out of it because he wouldn't like to be named, but one of my friends works at one of the hyperscalers and works with a lot of partners, and he says he's been going through evaluating different security tools, and he said, so you don't know what this OWASP thing you work on, but every one of these tools has a way to report against what it's doing for OWASP LLM top 10. So a lot of these newer, the AI native tools are basically coming with reporting built in to the extent that they're protecting against these to map against them out of the box, which I think is cool.
Yeah, and those are some of the listings of the companies and tools, both open source tools that are doing that as well as commercial tools. And so those are going to be listed in the solutions guide. Yep, and then for the, as you say, for the different controls that are out there, we've been doing in different standards for MITRE, et cetera. We've gone through the complete list and have that mapping that exists on the data gathering initiative. It's all on the GitHub for that one. Yep.
All right. Other question? All right, down here.
When will version 2 be released?
Sorry?
When will version 2 be released?
When will version 2 be released? Yes.
I think probably in November. We were originally shooting for early October, and people got busy because it's a volunteer project. But I think there are some deadlines where, on pain of having somebody else do it, people need to have some homework turned in next week, and I think that's kind of one of the final hurdles, and then we're down to voting and down selecting and layout. So hopefully November. Other questions? Yeah?
Do you have any opinions or insights about how AI may affect future creativity, as far as songs being written, movies being written, art being created?
It's funny, Scott and I were talking about this earlier. So the question is, opinions about AI tools and creativity, and what are people doing with this? And I'll let you tell your bit of the story.
Yeah, so I think we're all kind of in an evolution. It's a new technology, so everyone's kind of figuring out kind of where that fits in their toolkit. I have my son who is an artist, and so for him, he's not quite there yet on very excited about the AI stuff. But he's a digital artist, but as part of the toolkit, that's where we'll have to figure out how do we kind of blend that toolkit in with art, because I don't think it's going away. But figuring out what works and what doesn't, and what does art mean in the new sense is going to be interesting.
Art with an asterisk.
Art with an asterisk. Well, because there's a whole issue around copyright and who owns and how you get compensated, and there's a whole other side of this picture that really impacts artists, and so that is a yet to be determined, I think, area.
Yeah, I'll give you a few other things. The part that was very personal for me in the last year was, I don't think anybody's going to be shocked by the fact that ChatGPT may have written a few words in my book, but it's very much not a AI written piece of literature. And in fact, it was funny, when I started, O'Reilly had an outright ban on AI generated content anywhere near their stuff. And I was kind of trying to think, how am I going to get around this? Because there's no way that's going to work for me. And a few months into the project, they actually came out with author's guidelines for how to use Gen AI tools. And one of the reasons I bring this up is I think they're really good. And so I encourage people to go look at them. I think Some of that will be applicable in other areas, and other companies might want to adopt similar things. But I thought a way that respected that people are definitely going to be using these tools in new ways and they need to acknowledge it, but we don't want just a bunch of computer vomit plagiarism wrecking a brand. Like O'Reilly's very particular about their brand and going through the cover layout. No, it can't be that color, it's got to be this. So they care about that. The other thing I'll say is the AI regulations are coming. Some of them are here. There are going to be a lot more. And I'm actually working on an article right now where I'm just trying to help people understand them. And if you go and look at all the regulations, it's completely overwhelming. But what I'll tell you kind of helped me is there's really three things everybody's worried about, and it's getting expressed in different ways in the regulations. So one of them is, what are you doing with my data? And that involves everything from kind of personally identifiable information to, did you just scrape my website and take everything? The next thing is, what's going to happen to my job? And that goes everywhere from, are you using AIs to make hiring decisions? I think that's illegal in Europe now with the new AI Act. The next one that's going to be fun is, did you make an AI my manager? You know it's coming. And then the one that everybody's obviously worried about is, am I getting wholesale replaced? And then there is the last one, which is what I broadly call safety. And the safety stuff goes very specifically from places about, how are you going to use this in medical diagnosis and other already regulated industries? How is this going to play to that? All the way to, are you building Skynet, and what do I do when you're done building it? And we laugh about that, but I mean, the regulations that are going through in California right now are about very detailed stuff about how many billions of parameters can you train an AI on without having to get government approval, which is exactly that people are worried that people are building Skynet unsupervised.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some tricky parts to this too, right? Rachel, Brian just put out a guidance on deepfake. So both prepping for and then responding to deepfake. One of the big challenges around that is assistive technology. So assistive technology there's a lot of AI being applied to assistive technology. How do you create guidelines that don't, put people not able to leverage that technology to be, more participants? So it's very easy to say, hey, that person looks like they're doing AI for their interview, when maybe they were using an assistive technology that does exist to help people who have trouble keeping eye focus to adjust their eyes so that they're looking at you in that interview. So how do you determine that? That's going to be an interesting challenge as these regulations come forward.
Another piece of that, though, the way that discussion came up, and Rachel kind of educated on that on one of our meetings, but CISO at my company told me a story about an interview that he did for somebody applying for a job on the security team at my company who was definitely an AI deepfake. And he said the reason he was doing the interview is somebody lower down in the interview chain said, this is a little funny. The resume is great, did the interview, this is off. And when they really looked at it, this was somebody wearing a deepfake. And I don't know if they were a North Korean agent or what, but that's real, that's happening. Yeah.
Do you think we'll get to a point, considering this project coming forth, coming up with an AI secure development lifecycle similar to the SDL? So there you go.
Chapter 12. So I do have something in here that I call the Responsible AI Software Engineering Framework, and kind of includes a process. I mean, it's got a lot of steps that you will all recognize from traditional software, but how do you transplant some of those? And it's got basically a checklist for some of the things to think about. So I encourage you to come check it out. And again, you can come up afterwards and flip through it.
Yeah, and as part of the solutions guide, we had to come up with a context for how do we want to organize these different solutions. And as part of the outgrowth of that was that we needed to define an AI LLM ops process. And so in there, we've taken a shot at an LLM ops process and SecOps steps that are aligned to the development process. It'll look very familiar to you guys. So there's some great resources, I think, that to leverage.
By the way, if you want to start a food fight over on the AI side of the building, go do something that implies that ML ops and LLM ops are the same thing. Turns out people get very violent and passionate about this.
Yes.
All right, anybody else? All right, well, so thank you so much for coming out and joining. Really appreciated the super interactive conversation. So I understand we're the last meeting of the day here, so I don't think they're going to boot us out immediately. So if anybody wants to come up and chat, thanks a lot.